You've probably been told that Grave of the Fireflies is the ultimate anti-war movie. It is widely celebrated as a heartbreaking masterpiece about two innocent children destroyed by the utter cruelty of World War II. The kind of film most people swear they can only bear to watch once. But what if we've spent decades missing the most important layer of the story? What if the true catalyst for this tragedy wasn't just the American bombs, but a heartbreaking, psychological trap that the main character walked right into? What if the director himself explicitly stated that this is not an anti-war film? Most audiences completely overlook a deeper, more uncomfortable theme running through the narrative. It's a theme that shifts the focus away from geopolitical conflict and places it on the fragile, devastating nature of human choices under extreme pressure. Let's look at the story of Seita and Setsuko from a completely new perspective. Look, we all know the surface level tragedy. 14-year-old Seita and his tiny sister Setsuko lose their mother during the horrific firebombing of Kobe. Their father is out at sea fighting a losing naval war, leaving the children entirely to fend for themselves. At first they find shelter with a distant aunt, but as food shortages worsen and the living situation turns hostile, Seita decides he has had enough. He takes his sister, walks away, and moves into an abandoned bomb shelter by a pond. They try their absolute best to survive on their own, but hunger and disease prove too powerful. Setsuko dies of severe malnutrition and Seita dies completely alone in a crowded train station, forgotten by the world. It makes perfect sense to blame the war. The war destroyed their family, took their home, and stole their food. This is exactly how the vast majority of viewers perceive the film. But this is where the story evolves from a simple historical tragedy into a profound psychological warning. If we look closely at how Seita actually behaves, we see a boy dealing with unimaginable trauma the only way he knows how, by clinging to his dignity. He is a teenager forced into a brutal survival situation where he desperately wants to protect his sister, but he lacks the emotional maturity to handle the world around him. Throughout the film, he doesn't act like a calculating adult. He acts like a wounded, prideful boy, using independence as a shield. Think about the tension at his aunt's house. She complains that the children are eating scarce rations while refusing to work or help out around the home. Instead of trying to negotiate, swallow his pride, or simply help with the daily chores to keep the peace, Seita shuts down. His resentment and intense desire to prove he doesn't need these bitter adults push him to make a catastrophic choice, leaving a home that, despite its emotional hostility, actually provided physical shelter and food. He tells his sister, "We will manage on our own. We won't ask anyone for anything." It sounds incredibly noble, but it is a dangerous illusion. He chose emotional comfort over actual survival. And this isn't just an interpretation. The director, Isao Takahata, repeatedly expressed frustration with how audiences viewed his film. He openly stated that Seita wasn't written to be a flawless wartime hero. He was written to be a reflection of modern youth. Takahata explained that he envisioned Seita as a contemporary teenager who was suddenly sent back to the 40s via a time machine. The director explicitly noted, he doesn't bear with hardships. He thinks that it's easier to eat by themselves than to bear with the discrimination from his aunt. As a result, his life becomes harder. Such a feeling is closer to the one held by today's kids. Seita's pride isn't malice, it's a defense mechanism. He would rather have complete false independence than endure the minor humiliations of relying on someone who resents him. He chooses the path that feels better emotionally, completely blind to the fact that it is the exact path that will destroy them. If you want to see the exact moment where Seita's copying mechanism fails him, look no further than the hospital scene. It is arguably the most heartbreaking moment in the entire movie. Setsuko is desperately ill with severe diarrhea, a raging fever, and a terrible skin rash. Seita finally brings her to a doctor. The exhausted, indifferent medical professional gives a skeletal girl a brief look and shrugs, saying, "All this child needs is food." Seita screams back in absolute despair. Where am I supposed to get food? But think about what the movie has already shown us about Seita. He is incredibly resourceful. We have watched him successfully steal vegetables from fields, fight off threats, and aggressively scavenge houses during chaotic air raids. He is strong and fully capable. So the question is, why couldn't he work? Why didn't he offer to help a local farmer in exchange for a bag of rice? Why didn't he walk back to his aunt's house, bow his head, and beg for help to save his sister's life? Because to Seita, humbling himself before the adult world felt like an impossible, crushing humiliation. He preferred the illusion of control that came with being an independent rock thief over the painful submission of asking for assistance. The doctor's words are not just a critique of wartime cruelty. They highlight the tragic blind spot in Seita's worldview. This completely reframes the most disliked character in the movie, the aunt. For decades, audiences have viewed her as a heartless monster, but Takahata doesn't paint her as a one-dimensional villain driven by simple cruelty. She is just an ordinary woman caught in the jaws of total scarcity. The war taught her a brutal arithmetic. When resources are virtually zero, every extra mouse is a direct threat to her own children's lives. Her famous line, "If you don't work, you don't eat," isn't petty malice. It was the literal law of survival in 1945 Japan. She has a daughter and a tenant who are actively working to support the war effort, while Seita spends his days listening to music, sleeping in, and protecting his own comfort. Her pragmatism was harsh, but it kept her immediate family alive. In a broken world, she is just as much a victim of circumstance as the children, reacting to crisis with cold logic rather than empathy. This brings us to the devastating meaning behind the film's central symbol, the Fireflies. Seita catches them to bring beautiful light into their dark bomb shelter. It's a magical, comforting moment for his sister, but by the very next morning, they are all dead, and Seita quietly buries them in a tiny dirt grave. The Fireflies are not just a metaphor for innocent lives lost in war. They are metaphor for Seita's choices. By cutting himself off from society to live in that cave, Seita created a beautiful glowing world of total freedom. But it was a world completely disconnected from the ecosystem of survival. The fireflies burn incredibly bright, but their glow is brief, isolated, and doomed. He chose a short, beautiful life of pride over a long, difficult life of compromise. Going back to his aunt felt impossible, but that exact act of humility was their only path to life. Grave of the Fireflies stays with you not just as a historical reminder of war's horror, but as a bitter lesson about human nature. Seita doesn't die because he is a bad person. He dies because he is a traumatized child who couldn't overcome his resentment and adapt to a harsh reality. Meanwhile, the ant operates by the brutal logic of survival. In a world of limited resources, you prioritize the collective group over the outsider. From the perspective of wartime Japan, this wasn't villainy. It was social responsibility, putting the community's survival above individual ego. Takahata didn't just want to show the horrors of air raids. He wanted to show how ordinary people become victims of their own unchecked emotions when their world is shattered. This film isn't actually about the past. It's a mirror held up to the present. Pride, isolation, and the refusal to cooperate with a flawed society are things we deal with every single day. It leaves us with haunting question. If we were stripped of everything, would we have the humility to survive? Or would our pride burn out just like the fireflies? At its core, Grave of the Fireflies is more than just an anti-war film. It's a monument to the fragility of human nature, a reminder of how easily our desire for dignity can twist into a tragic trap when the world around us falls apart. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this kind of film analysis, consider subscribing.